part of the brain helps us think logically, make positive choices, make decisions on our values. It's mature. It only gets fully developed in our mid-20s. This is where we learn new skills. And you use that time to do some sort of practice that creates stillness and calms your nervous system. You will notice that you respond a lot more throughout the day. You will be a lot less reactive.
Today's guest is Elizabeth, a stress coach for mums. She has 4 kids, 3 boys and 1 baby girl. Elizabeth has been married for 13 years and is super passionate about mental health and emotional wellness in motherhood. She helps overwhelmed mums reduce the mental stress so they can respond with patience and calm with their kids. She teaches proactive ways to be less stressed, how to prioritize needs, and ways to regulate emotions when feeling triggered. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. That was a really good introduction.
I don't know about moms. I think everyone needs that in their life.
Yes, I feel like a lot of moms need this in their life for sure.
What is one of the most courageous things you have done?
I was thinking about that today, and I think for me, it was asking for help and going for professional counseling when I was in a hard season in my life. I think that was probably most courageous, admitting that I was truly struggling, that I could not fix this on my own, and that I actually needed support from somebody who has gone through this journey that I am struggling in. So
that's really courageous, definitely, especially when we're not used to asking for help from others. It can be so daunting. I totally can understand that. What took you on your journey of helping others be less stressed? Is this something you naturally fell into from your experiences, or did you see there was a need for it?
It came from my own experience. So I was struggling with parenting my 3rd son. He was one of those kids that I constantly had to put fires out all day long. He just took so much out of me, like so much of my energy. And a friend of mine suggested to go to parenting counseling. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I should know how to parent by now. This is my 3rd kid. I should have it figured out. But you know what? I took the suggestion because before that, I went to individual counseling for me. And it was so profound and helped me so much on a personal level that I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to hurt. So I reached out and I started seeing a counselor, and it was really, really helpful. I started to learn about emotional connection with our kids. And if we meet their emotional needs, they are more likely to cooperate if they're in a better internal place. And when we are in a good place internally, we are able to create this connection and a bond. And when you're connected with another like loved one, there's a lot more cooperation. And I tried implementing the things I was learning. It was a gentle parenting approach. And I was kind of struggling in the beginning because it was right around COVID when everything got shut down, everything like you got isolated. And I noticed that I was kind of running on empty with my kids because they were with me all the time. And I felt like I couldn't get a break in. And I noticed that I was a lot more reactive with my kids. I was raising my voice, even though I was trying not to. And I was a lot more frustrated and agitated. And then around the same time, shortly after I started therapy, I bought a program, like a coaching program, and it talked about having like a good morning routine that sets you up for the day and kind of things that you do in there that support your mental health and emotional health. And I started implementing that. I started to get up earlier in the mornings before my kids. And I use that time wisely to do things that support my mental health. And I started to notice a significant change in how I was
Wow.
showing up during the day with my kids. I was a lot more patient and calm, and I was actually able to implement the parenting strategies that I was being taught.
That's really good because everybody needs to look after their mental well-being, and especially in the whole pandemic, it was absolutely atrocious. And like you say, with all the lockdowns and being at home and surrounded by the kids, and especially having four for you, can totally understand.
Then I was thinking, I'm like, what about other moms? I know I'm not the only one who is struggling with this, who's struggling with
Definitely.
controlling my big feelings and my emotions and like feeling like I'm running on empty and constantly being overwhelmed. And I feel like I started implementing healthy coping skills and it was so transformative to me. I'm like, other moms need to know about this. It's a thing. It's possible to not hate motherhood. It's possible to feel good as a mom and not just reactive all the time. And that put me on the journey of helping other moms.
That's excellent. How does stress affect our ability to emotionally regulate?
Yeah, that is a really good one because that is one of the things that I learned in therapy that was really, really helpful.
Hmm.
So we kind of need to know a little bit about psychology and the way our brain works. So there are like three main parts of the brain when it comes to like emotional regulation and stress. And right now, like the part of the brain we are in is our frontal lobe. It's like right
Hmm.
behind our forehead, and I call it the thinking brain. And that part of the brain helps us think logically, make positive choices, make decisions on our values. It's mature. It only gets fully developed in our mid 20s. And this is where we learn new skills. This is like you and I are talking right now. We're in this part of the brain. And then when there's some sort of stress on our body or on our mind, like if we have unmet needs, if we're like sleep deprived, or if we're hungry, or if we are in
Mm,
pain, or if somebody says something that is really uncomfortable or triggering, if there's too much going on, we shift to our emotional part of the brain, which is like right in the center of our brain. And that part of the brain shuts off our thinking brain. And in our emotional part of the brain, this is where we make decisions on our emotions, right? And it comes
mhm.
out in our words and our behavior. We're more agitated and frustrated. It comes out in our tone. We're more disrespectful, maybe even more rude, more
Yes.
snappy. And sometimes you're like, I don't want to do this, but it's almost like you can't stop yourself because your thinking brain literally shuts off during that time. And then we have our survival part of the brain, which is
Mhm.
where our brainstem is in the back. And this is our fight, flight, or freeze. That's when the stress gets so big. Sometimes, you're so frustrated with something, and then it builds up, builds up, builds up because you don't take a break. Let's say your computer's not working and you're just trying to figure it out and it's not working. And it just like you continue. And it gets to a point where you just literally want to punch the computer. The stress build up so much in your
Mm,
brain. It's in the fight, flight, or freeze mode. And some people go into fight. They physically want to do something about it, or they're going to verbally just really fight for it. Other people just give up. They're like, I'm done. I'm
yes.
walking away. I'm not even dealing with this. And then like, I don't want to have nothing to do with this. And then the other people just like freeze. They just get lost and they don't know what to do. And so knowing that is really important because when our stress in our brain keeps building up, it's going to push us eventually to fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm,
And that's why when like the stressors build up with like you're hungry, you're sleep deprived, your child is screaming, a phone call, and like something else is happening, and you just completely lose your marbles because there's so much pressure. Your brain is pulled in so many directions. And it needs some time to de-escalate and decompress. And if you don't give it that time, that's when that explosions happen with our emotions.
absolutely. That's really beautifully put. And I can totally understand that all the scenarios. What do you recommend mums can do when they feel overwhelmed and triggered with their children? As you've just explained, the effects of emotionally regulating, but sometimes it can be easier said than done.
For sure. It's easy kind of talk about this, but then in the heat of the moment, what do you do?
Mm,
So here's the thing. I teach my moms to proactively do things on a regular basis to take care of themselves and lower their stress hormone. So there's like basic things that you can do to feel less stress in your mind and body. So one of them is prioritizing your basic needs, which is getting enough sleep and eating meals. Here's the thing, when you're sleep deprived, your brain literally cannot think clearly and make positive choices. If you remember when moms are listening, when they had a newborn and they didn't get enough sleep, do you remember how more easily triggered you were by maybe your spouse or your kids, other children, because your brain was sleep deprived, and it's really hard to make positive choices when one of your literal basic needs are not met. Or when you're hungry, we're often hangry. Same thing like when toddlers, they're hungry or tired, they act out in negative ways because that part of the brain is so focused on the unmet need, it has a harder time to regulate emotions. So it's so important to proactively take care of your basic things. And sleep and food is something that moms oftentimes don't think that it affects them, but it really, really does. So that is like one of my like basic things. Like you have to take care of your basics, because if you don't, you really will be in complete survival mode. And so if you have a baby who's a poor sleeper, maybe look into a sleep trainer. If you struggle with poor sleep because of health issues, maybe go see a doctor. It is really important to get good sleep and eat nutritious foods multiple times a day, right? Don't be like, oftentimes moms, they will, drink some coffee, grab a granola bar, and then wonder why 4 p.m. they're freaking out at their kids. Well, because you're so hungry and your body is missing what like a basic need. So that is like one of the basic things. Really take care of your basics proactively, and you will already see a difference in how you're able to emotionally regulate. The other thing is, oftentimes moms say yes to too many things.
Yes.
They take on so much on their plate because they feel guilty saying no, or they feel like they have to say yes. And then they are pulled in so many different directions, and they have all these commitments that they made, and they don't have a moment to recharge. And then they find themselves reacting. Yes, if you have activities out of your house 6 days a week and you don't have time to go to the bathroom in peace, of course you're going to be like a lot more agitated. You're rushing out the door constantly, running late, and the kids are not cooperating, or kids need time to decompress too. That is another thing. Like, I encourage moms to look at your schedule and look at the season in life you are in, and see what things you can either delete or delegate. You should have at least a few evenings a week where you don't go anywhere, and you get to be home, and you get to use that time to just have a chill evening at home, to just with family, to decompress, to have your kids play in the yard, or sit there on the patio and drink some tea in peace and calm. It is really good and calming for your nervous system. So that is like the number 2 thing that I say. Look at your schedule, see what you can delete and delegate, because that oftentimes is what pushes mom into stress. There's too much on her schedule. And the third thing is that I think is really important on a regular basis, proactively. And I mentioned that this for me, I think mornings are best, because that is the time in your day where you kind of have full control over. Yeah. I get up before my kids. I have 4 kids, 10, 7, 5, and 10 months old.
Wow.
So I have 4 kids, and I am able to get up because I prioritize my needs and take care of myself. I'm in a better place mentally and emotionally, and I'm able to get up at around 5:30 to 6 in the morning before my kids do, and I have a morning kind of like ritual or routine, things that I do that support me for the day. And for me, it's personally like a gratitude journal, and like I journal and I do some short meditation, something that creates some sort of stillness in your day where you're not rushing, you're not reactive. If you wake up at the last minute with your kids and somebody like pooped their pants and someone like spilled water on someone else and you're just jumping into reactive mode right away. But if you do get up before your kids a little bit and you use that time to do some sort of practice that creates stillness and calms your nervous system, you will notice that you respond a lot more throughout the day. You will be a lot less reactive. So those are my like tips for doing things proactively to support yourself. And here's the thing, you need to do things proactively. If you think you can rely only on in the moment emotional regulation, it's going to be 1,000 times harder, because if you don't take care of your needs and if you're mentally in a bad place, all the emotion regulation for like triggering moments will be so much harder for your brain to implement. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Everything you said. And it's so true. Even with sleep, it's so underrated. Obviously, being a new mum, I can understand for parents, you don't always get the sleep. And then later on, not eating properly. Of course, you have to make sure you look after yourself. And it's so important to have that me time. And like you said, first thing in the morning is the best time, as long as you've had a good sleep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So important. What do you do when you feel guilty for exploding at your kids? Because let's face it, we've all done it. We all do it. So what would you recommend?
Yeah. So it definitely does still happen. I work on myself, taking care of myself proactively, but there are still moments when there's just too much happening. We're rushing out the door because we're either running late in the mornings. I feel like that's the hardest time of the day for me, when trying to get the kids out the door for school in time and they just drag their feet, it seems like. But and like for me, it usually happens the week leading before my cycle. I noticed I'm a lot more kind of on edge, and I'm sure it's like a hormonal thing. I feel like that's kind of what usually happens for me. And I know that when that happens, it's because my brain is under too much stress in that moment. It's not because I'm a bad mom. It's because there's just too much for me to handle in that moment. And my brain has a harder time regulating the emotions. And one of the things that I do, and when I start feeling guilty, I have a phrase that I tell myself: I'm still a good mom. I'm still a good mom. I'm a good mom, and I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm a good mom who's having a hard time.
Yes.
Because it's not because you want to blow up at your kids, it's because you're truly struggling emotionally. And I'd say, like, I'm a good mom who's having a hard time, or I'm a good mom who's having a hard moment. And that, because here's the thing with mom guilt. Mom guilt comes from the internal messages we tell ourselves. So if we tell ourselves, oh, I'm not perfect, I messed up, I made a mistake, I'm gonna traumatize my kids for life, I'm a terrible mom, that's gonna push you more into mom guilt. But if you tell yourself, like, I'm still a good mom who's just having a hard day, I'm still a good mom who had a hard moment, and then when you kind of de-escalate and calm down, usually in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to do. I usually do it later on, maybe even later in the day. And I come to my kids and I say, hey, I made a mistake today. I was really having a hard time. I got really frustrated and I yelled at you. I'm so sorry for doing that. That was not okay. Next time I will try to take some deep breaths or walk away when I want to yell. And so that also models for my kids what to do when you do mess up, right? And you know what? If we would be perfect, or push or put ourselves in a position where we have this such perfection standard for ourselves, first of all, it's unattainable. And then you feel even more like a failure because you're not able to attain it. And then you're pretty much setting that high standard for your kids, and they're humans and they're going to mess up. And then they feel extra guilt that they have to be this perfect person. So I have this affirmation that I can maybe even share with your guests that we can attach. But it's like an affirmation that it's for moms who feel guilty after messing up. And it's like, I don't know, 5 or 7 minutes that you listen to these phrases saying, I'm still a good mom. I'm allowed to make mistakes. My kids don't need a perfect mom, because those internal messages is so important what you tell yourself in that moment. And it's going to push you further into mom guilt, or it helps you kind of get out of that mom guilt.
Absolutely. And I think everything you've just said is so important. Like you say, if you're trying to be perfect, you're setting yourself up for a fall. It's not going to happen. Disappointment after disappointment to be feeling that guilt. Children are children. I mean, the classic is you're about to go out the door and they can't find their shoes.
Yes.
That's parenting. Expect it.
Yes,
It's
for
part of
sure.
it.
And yes, yes. And I think that is really good to kind of like keep that in mind. And I think another thing is that I do is like at the end of the day, when I think, like, let's say it was a hard day and I did, yell at my kids, I try to get curious at the end of the day. Like, I wonder what happened, instead of like, oh, I'm a terrible mom. It's like, I wonder what was going on. What happened that pushed me into reactive mode? Was I hungry? Was I sleep deprived? Was I anxious? Did I have tension with my spouse and my brain was consumed about that and it had a harder time regulating my emotions? So like, get curious instead of judgmental. Like, I wonder what was going on for me that pushed me into reactive mode. And I also want to mention there are a few things that I do in the heat of the moment when I am triggered. So there's a few things that I do in the heat of the moment when, like, let's say I did all the proactive things, right, that I'm supposed to do, and then still triggering things happen from frustrations come up. One of the easiest things that I have trained my body to do, it is taking deep breaths when I start feeling frustrated. Deep breathing is actually really calming to the nervous system. It sends oxygen back to your thinking brain and it helps that part of the brain turn back on. Because if you remember, when we're frustrated, this part of the brain shuts off and it goes to our emotional part of the brain. So when we take deep breaths, it helps us kind of slow the reaction time and it helps oxygen go back to our thinking or positive part of the brain, problem solving part of the brain. And then taking deep breaths was really helpful. Then if I feel like frustration is building up and if I am physically able to walk away, if my kids are all physically safe, I will communicate that I need a break and I will walk away. I will say, hey, mama's getting all frustrated right now. I need a little minute, or I need 5 minutes. Please don't talk to me. I need a break. And I will, if I can, go to a different part of the house, go step outside, breathe some fresh air, just to de-escalate. Something that does not involve your phone. No screen time. Because that will actually increase the stress hormone in your brain and it won't actually help you calm your nervous system down. And then the other thing is I will give myself like affirmations that I tell myself in the heated moments. Like, this is hard and I can handle this. This is what it is right now. I don't like it and I'll get through it. Or if my kids are melting down, I'm like, I have a good kid who's having a hard time.
Yes.
Because I know when I melt down or blow up, it's not because I want to, it's because I'm truly struggling. Same thing for my kids. When they have a meltdown, it's not because they're like, oh, I want to give mom a miserable time. It's like they're so frustrated. Not. Yeah, they're either overwhelmed by a big feeling and they don't know how to handle it. And so I tell myself, I have a good kid who's having a hard time. So like having an affirmation that like, this is hard because it is hard. And like, or, for me, my favorite one is, this is what it is right now. I don't like it and I'll get through it. Just kind of affirming myself. This sucks, but I can make it. Like, I'll get through it. That sends a safety signal to my brain. And that helps this part of the brain, the thinking brain, turn back on and stay more calm and regulated in the heat of the moment. Though I tell you, if you don't do things proactively, relying on these in the moment strategies, again, it's going to be a lot less effective. It's going to feel 1,000 times harder and you will feel like you're failing more than you're succeeding. So it's so important to do the proactive things.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, like you say, just walking away, breaking the pattern you're in, that will just help in itself. The fact you're walking away, the situation has stopped.
Yeah, and I think it's good to like make sure when you do that, please communicate it with your,
Yes.
partner or your kids. Like, I need to take a break. I need 10 minutes to just clear my head or cool off so I don't blow up and yell at anybody, or so I don't say or do hurtful things. And my kids already know that about me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say I need a break because I'm having a hard time, please give me 10 minutes and don't talk to me for a little bit. Or like sometimes we get in the car and I'm already like all flustered because we were rushing out the door, and I say, please don't talk to me for a few minutes. I need some time to cool off. And as I'm driving, I'm taking deep breaths to calm my body down, to de-escalate, to calm the nervous system down. Sometimes you can turn on some music that can help, So you there's so many different coping things that you can do that calm your brain down.
Absolutely. So what resources do you recommend, tools, daily tips to anyone who wants to be less stressed, and especially for mums and parents?
So my biggest suggestion is like doing things proactively. Like in the morning is my favorite time of the day, getting up and using that time wisely, half an hour, maybe even an hour if you can, but half an hour to just do practices that are helpful. Also, I can attach, we can do in the show notes, we can attach where people can find me. I have 5 strategies that calm your nervous system when you're triggered and overwhelmed,
Yeah.
that can calm your body down. And then I can also send you a gift of the free, like the affirmations for when you feel mom guilt when you blow up. Those are going to be really good because sometimes when we feel guilty, all those internal talk that we've had for years will just push us down that negative rabbit hole. And we need some like positive self-talk to help like pull ourselves out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll put your details in the show notes. So where can the listeners find you online? What is your website?
Yeah, so my website is emotionallyhealthylegacy.com. On that website, I have some free resources. I also offer free stress management calls that mom can schedule. Like it's a half an hour call that we can kind of talk about your situation. I can give you some tips specifically for your life. I also have a 4-week Be Less Stressed coaching program. It's it's one-on-one coaching program right now, and we go through your life. I teach you all the things, and I keep you accountable to implement these positive things that you're learning. Oftentimes, we know what to do. We don't do what we know.
Yes.
And so my job is to keep you accountable so you are implementing. And I also have a podcast, Emotionally Healthy Legacy, on all podcast platforms. You can pull it up and find it. And I have also a lot of tips on there that can be really helpful.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing your courageous journey with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
What is your definition of courage? Because we are the Create the Courage to Be Fearless podcast. So what is your definition of courage?
My definition of courage is doing the right thing even when it feels scary.